E ngā manuhia o te ao. Piki mai, kake mai, nau mai, haere mai. Greetings to all peoples, all languages, all cultures, and all customs. We bid you a warm welcome, greetings to all. Kawea mai ngā parerau kawakawa ngā tini aitua o te wā, kia poroporo akitia, rātou kia rātou. Bring with you the memories of your loved ones who have passed on, that we may mourn and remember them together. Ko tātou te hunga ora e tau nei, tātou e kawe ake nei ngā moemoea o rātou mā, hei painga mō ngā whakatipuranga o a pōpō. We the living gathered here seek to carry forth the legacies that they have left us for the betterment of future generations. Ka mihi ki ngā maunga whakahi, ka mihi ki ngā awa e rere nei, ngā waka, ngā whenua haumako tuku iho. I acknowledge the ancestral lands, the rivers, the lakes, the mountains, the canoes, and the lands upon which we all meet today. I would like to open our meeting with a traditional Māori blessing. Nō reira kia karakia tātou. Kia taunga manaakitanga a te mea ngaro ki runga ki tēnā o tātou, ki runga anō hoki i tēnei huihuinga. Kia māhea te huama kihikihi, kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha me te reo Māori, kia tūturu o whiti, whakamaua mai kia tīna, tīna. Haumie huie, tāi ki e. Let the strength and life force of our ancestors be with us today as we meet, freeing our path from obstruction so that our words, spiritual power, and language are upheld, permanently fixed, established, and understood, forward together. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa.
Kia ora, Ben. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou, ko waio, he urio no te tairāwhiti me ngā titu wharetoa. Nō reira, ko ngai tā manuhiri, Ngāti Porou, Ngāti Kahungunu, me ngā titu wharetoa oku aku iwi. Welcome, and we are very blessed to have you all here. Thank you, Ben, for introducing our kaupapa, and we are really excited to have you on board today. So welcome to the very first Indigenous Research Network joint workshop that we have, the power of inclusivity. I will be your MC today. I'm also the co-chair of the Indigenous Research Network and our Tangata Whenua Alliance here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm really excited about the great lineup of speakers we have for this session. I'm excited for them to share their learnings and experiences as young leaders in their Indigenous communities. So our workshop today aims to display the value of inclusion for young Indigenous people in climate decisions and actions globally. We've gathered young emerging leaders to share their lived experiences and identify how the communities, their own communities, use traditional knowledge, practices, and food sources that can improve food security and resilience while having lower emissions. So we're just going to start off with a few technical and housekeeping notes to ensure we can run this session effectively. If you're not a presenter, please keep your microphone muted. Please also ensure that you are in speaker view, not gallery view. I'd also like to note that the session will be recorded to ensure that notes from the important discussions we're having today can be accurately captured. They won't be made available publicly. So firstly, I'd like to start off with introducing my esteemed colleague, Shiloh Babington. So Shiloh is a young Māori, wahine Māori, a young Māori woman who got the opportunity to live, work and study in Japan, where she immersed herself in a different culture that made her further appreciate her own and sparked her love for international relations. Shiloh graduated from Victoria University here in Wellington with a Bachelor of Arts and a triple major in International Relations, political science and education. Now she works at New Zealand's Ministry for the Primary Industries in the Global Research Alliance Secretariat, where she and I lead the Indigenous Research Network. Charlotte was invited to represent Aotearoa New Zealand at APEC twice this year, where she realised the need for more Indigenous voices and perspectives in global agricultural issues. Charlotte has pulled this workshop series together to inspire APEC economies and GRA members to create access to opportunities for young Indigenous people to contribute and lead. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce my colleague, who I'm really grateful for, Shiloh Babington.
Kia ora, Kit. Kia ora koutou. Ina mana, ina reo, ina karanga. Maha o te wā tēnā koutou katoa. To all authorities, all voices, to the many chiefs gathered here today, behold the breath of life. My name is Shiloh Babington. I'm from Wellington, the capital of New Zealand. Today I'll be talking about the power of Indigenous inclusivity, and with that, my growth as an Indigenous youth helping lead this global movement. Ko Hikarangi tuku maunga. My mountain is Hikarangi. Ko Waipu tuku awa. My river is Waipu. Ko Harauta tuku aka. My canoe is Harauta. Ko Ngāti Porou me Ngāti Kahununu tuku iwi. Ngāti Porou and Ngāti Kahununu are my tribes. I am an Indigenous New Zealander. As Māori, I trace my whakapapa, genealogy, back to my land. I and my family before me connect to a particular mountain, river, and migration canoe. My ancestors migrated here to build a life for themselves and their future generations in New Zealand. Over time, as they established themselves in different regions, our tribes came into existence. So when introducing ourselves, Māori share our whakapapa, our connection to the land to build connections with others. Mother Earth is known as Papa Tuanuku, the ancestress of all Māori. Our land is of paramount significance to Māori, socially, culturally, spiritually, politically, and economically. Indigenous communities share a sense of obligation rather than ownership. People belong to the land as opposed to land belonging to a person. This intergenerational view and knowledge held over time provides a valuable perspective. I'm a part of the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gases, GRA, which is an international organization with 67 member economies who work collaboratively, finding ways to grow more food without growing emissions, partnering with regional and global organizations to reduce agricultural emissions while also supporting food security and economic growth objectives. The GRA has 4 research groups: livestock, paddy rice, croplands, and the Integrative Research Group. Under these research groups, the GRA led networks that specialize in a specific aspect of greenhouse gas mitigation, adaptation, and capability programs. The Global Research Alliance recognizes the value of Indigenous knowledge and leadership in addressing the global challenges we face. For Indigenous peoples, the impacts of climate change will be compounded by the impacts of social inequity because of colonization and other challenges. Indigenous peoples are faced with stereotyping, academic bias, the devaluing of Indigenous knowledge, including science, and feeling like they're alone in this grief. It is important to create opportunities that value Indigenous knowledge and experience and the contribution it can make in facing the climate change challenge. I lead the GRA's Indigenous Research Network, IRN, co-led by New Zealand and Samoa, our co-chair being our MC today. Established in 2021, the IRN aims to strengthen Indigenous voices in global agricultural issues and empower traditional knowledge and practices to be used in our fight against climate change. Māori only comprise around 2% of the scientific community in New Zealand. Underrepresentation in the New Zealand scientific community is replicated across Indigenous peoples globally. Known structural barriers that begin before primary school and institutional racism has impeded the scientific community's ability to attract Indigenous students in science careers. The IRN aims to help overcome these existing barriers in career pipelines and use traditional knowledge and methods of learning to build capability for today and for future generations. We are working with our partners to create opportunities for Indigenous peoples' leadership, influence, education, and employment in these spaces globally. In 2022, the Tangata Whenua Alliance was established to support New Zealand's participation in the Indigenous Research Network. Tangata Whenua means people of the land. The Tangata Whenua Alliance has a key focus on community resilience to climate change, according to traditional knowledge. This group is by Māori for Māori, comprised of Indigenous experts who were born, raised, and live in rural communities across New Zealand, connecting Māori into agricultural greenhouse gas emissions research, as well as mitigation and adaptation technologies and practices. The Tangata Whenua Alliance is such an important aspect of the Indigenous Research Network, because to be able to start the conversation, exchanging and helping our partners, we need to understand ourselves, Māori, our knowledge, our interests, our practices across tribes, and how we want to engage internationally. Once we can understand ourselves, then we can branch out and support others as they create their own domestic alliances where we can work collaboratively through the Indigenous Research Network. We aim to enable and empower Māori as weavers of knowledge with Indigenous communities around the world. Because Indigenous peoples, our knowledge and systems are the solution, not the problem. Indigenous communities are those most directly affected by the impacts of climate change. Every day these impacts threaten traditional knowledge being passed on. For Māori, the impacts of climate change could wipe away our identity and the future for the communities we've built. Indigenous communities have a unique and valuable perspective on nature and its conservation, grounded in generations of wisdom and stewardship. We need to uplift Indigenous youth and equip them to effect change that's rooted in Indigenous culture and knowledge. It is the only thing that will ensure that all this work we are doing will carry on in future generations. The intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge is key. Climate decisions will only be effective if they include all people, regardless of their age, gender, or ethnicity. I want to enable young Indigenous people to articulate their voices, their worries, their perspectives, and their solutions to protect their future. We need to normalize young voices in these global organizations changing policy. We only have a limited amount of time left before the effects of climate change become irreversible. There's going to be drastic ramifications regarding sea level rising and crazy weather events. Climate change has no bias. The impacts are generational and currently shaping a new mindset for people. Young people are reconsidering their time, responsibilities, education, career, family life. We are reconsidering everything because of the unknown the climate crisis has inflicted on our lives. Do I want to bring children into this world one day? Will my children have access to fresh air? Are they going to have food and clean water? Will they be able to go outside? Survival cannot rely on equality. We need equity. Therefore, to reduce vulnerability and create more resilient communities, we need to give Indigenous communities increased access to resources. Everyone should have the tools to survive. Indigenous communities may not be rich in resources and opportunities, but they are rich in knowledge and lived experiences, which is just as, maybe even more valuable. In the Indigenous Research Network, we are wanting to shift the narrative. We want to prove that there is hope and there are solutions. We just need to use all resources and knowledge available. Opportunity. I want our APEC economies to create opportunities that unlock the potential of their Indigenous youth, empowering their future leaders. I got the opportunity to move to Fukuoka, Japan for a year, studying and working in a completely different environment, in a new culture that made me further appreciate my own. From then on, I wanted to devote my career to connecting cultures, giving others the same immersive experience. I overcame barriers and became the first and only person on all sides of my family to graduate from university. And soon after, I got the opportunity to start my career in government through Tupatoa, an Indigenous internship program. Coming into New Zealand's Ministry for Primary Industries, I got the opportunity to lead the Indigenous Research Network alongside our New Zealand and Samoa co-chairs. Because of my role, I got the opportunity to speak at the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC, in February this year, focused on minority groups' efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Following this, in August, the United States personally invited me to represent New Zealand at APEC once again, this time in Seattle, focused on Indigenous women and the economy. I quickly realized the urgent need for more Indigenous voices, specifically young perspectives in global agricultural issues. Most of the time, the focus is on sustaining the environment for our next future generations. Well, I believe the next generation of leaders should be given the opportunity to contribute, if not lead the discussions, decisions, and actions on how we protect their future. This is why I created this workshop series, Indigenous Research Network, The Power of Inclusivity, focused on gathering young emerging leaders to share their voices, to display on a global stage the value of young Indigenous voices in climate decisions and actions. The opportunities I've gained so far are just proof that the inclusion of Indigenous youth is powerful. It has created a snowball effect of opportunities for me and will do for others around the world. My story may be different to others, but the principle remains the same. We need to provide opportunities for Indigenous youth because the power of Indigenous inclusivity is based on a platform of opportunities that organizations like APEC and the GRA, and many here listening today, can create. We only have one earth that we all share. The only way to protect it is if we work together. So whether you're Indigenous or a champion wanting to support the Indigenous people in your economy, I welcome you into the Indigenous Research Network. In closing, I would like to leave you with this whakatauki, Māori proverb. I hare taku toa I te toa takitahi, engari hi toa takitani. My strength is not mine alone. It comes from the collective group. Be part of the change we want to see in the world. Kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you so much. Sorry, Kat, you're on mute.
Tēnā koe Shai, tēnei te mihi kia koe, tauke he mihi kauana kia koe. Thank you so much, Shai, for that insightful kōrero and background, and basically sharing with your heart, your experiences, and we really appreciate that. And I think that a lot of us on here can relate to that experience. Coming up next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Gina Maguire. She is an Aui Polish woman who works and resides in Hawaii. She's a student of Labau, Hawaiian medicine, proud land caretaker, and a horse mum. Gina is a tribal agriculture fellow and an Indigenous ecologist with the Akaka Foundation and Institute of Pacific Islands Forestry. She writes for the Native Climate Initiative. Gina holds a BA from Stanford University, MS from University of Hawaii, Hilo, in Conservation Biology and Environmental Science, a MA in Creative Writing from Lancaster University, and a PhD in Geography and Environment from the University of Hawaii, Manoa. Her research focuses in cross-Indigenous collaboration, Indigenous research methodologies, and rural community wellbeing and ecologies. Nō reira, nau mai hara mai, Gina. Welcome.
Thank you so much for that super kind introduction, and thank you, Shai, so much for your presentation. It's difficult to follow off of that. It was amazing. Aloha nui, everyone. I'd like to open the space with a quick oli, or a chant. So I'll do that, and then I'll give an explanation about what it means. I'll take my glasses off. Ulu vehi vehi kana helea o kia aui ka puni ula I ke ko e o kaua o iri mai e. O iri mai e ka lai kahi kina kaino na kupuna nania mana kia ia mana loa e. He aha I kaloa kia ina kahikolea e klae kayomai. Thank you guys. I share that I'm actually not in Hawaii at the moment. I'm in Nevada in the United States, or on the continent, I should say. And so for me, that's really just to ground myself and open this space in a way that's usually when we chant together, we're listening to each other and coming forward in a place of intention. So if you guys caught that talking about Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea, two of the mountains on my island, so just representing my Hawaii island in particular today. So as that super kind introduction said, I'm here today in my role as a student employing healing, la'au lapa'au, and an ecologist who focuses on and works within Native communities, lands and seas, but also as a writer for my work that focuses on the intersection of Native peoples and climate. I say that because I'm going to intersperse pieces of poetry while sharing some of the ongoing efforts and challenges faced by Native peoples in the US within rapid climate and agricultural change. When we talk about climate, we tend to think global. However, for me, it's in the small, the local, the refugia that hope and resiliency are sustained. And I'd like to open with a story from my childhood. On special mornings, I would stumble through the hallway into our living room, pictured here, into a wall of hanging green, a taut line of white string on which the vines my dad had carefully gathered the day before hung gracefully. The air in our house was always heavy, humid, and tainted with the must of the surrounding forest. But on these special mornings, it was crisp with the sweet smell of the stripped maile vines, which are all pictured here. The scientific name for these vines is Elixia stellata. The Latin name recalls the setting or placement of stars. In Hawaiian, maile is known as an adornment within the forest, within our myths and storied places, upon elders and loved ones as garlands of love and respect. When maile was in our house, it meant that someone had passed on or someone was getting married, an occasion that warranted the embodied aloha of the forest. Maile needs the soil and water of an intact Hawaiian forest. Few grow maile themselves, but rather gather within the few remnant old-growth forests that remain. These we know as kipuka. My father was one of these few who could cultivate the stars within the forest, and to do so in our area of invaded forest, that meant that he and my mother rebuilt a Hawaiian forest, an effort measured in decades, not years. To gather maile, one must strip the vine, and not every vine is meant to be handled. The soldiers, my dad called the ones that he gathered, the ones pictured here, the ones able to sacrifice. When done right, this gathering is part of how the forest lives, a key component of regeneration and reciprocal relationship. I followed behind him many, many times through our garden, through the ancestral forest in times of great need, in search of stars. I watched as he navigated these maile patches within the forest, stripped the vines using his teeth. From small kid days through college years, I watched as he carefully laid out and selected each vine from the living room clothesline, spinning the fibers into elegant, highly coveted garlands, our lei. I watched. For years I observed, but my hands and my teeth did not learn the thumb and forefinger twist needed to strip the vine without tearing it, did not build the muscle, the finger memory to circularly wind the vines together, tie in the smaller strips, not learn to get the bitter sap on my tongue. Many that sell these lei use green thread to tie the pieces together, and this my father accomplished with nothing but the forest fibers alone, as our ancestors did. My father is now many, many miles away, and I persist in place. My hands and my sight did not master the moves until I was alone, until there was no one to lean on, no one to watch anymore. Our cultural lifeways, our cultivation and gathering practices, integral to the continued well-being of our lands and seas, are dependent on ensuring that our practices are not just observed or documented, but are lived. We, as a next generation of elders and of land stewards, cannot wait until we are standing alone. I hope to share a call today for research that honors and follows paths that put ancestral knowledge forms and practices at the forefront, that considers the diverse ways that we care for our crops, our forests, rivers, seas, all our relations, these the stars on which we are interdependent. You can go next slide. I was born and raised on Hawaii Island, on coastlines home to death ceremony grasses and dream weaving leaves that sway in sacred two-step. The coast, a braid of salt and sweat and sea, where those that past persist, where cultural practice lives. These are coasts now challenged by rising seas and unpredictable storm events. Our grave sites meander into solemn waves, our leaping off points for ancestral duty, while evermore the song of our fish and shell people prevails. The opihi, our limpets, whisper a mournful hum as the elders slowly disappear, and with them follows our practice, our well-being, as shadow to light. Aging leaves turn dust settle within the scarred and resting stones, the heiau, the stone altars hidden, but not yet forgotten. Their dreams soar over waves to horizon's edge, and the stones stir uneasy as their people become severed from land and sea and spirit. The forest roots press deeper to carry the kaumaha, the grief, the sadness ever growing. I come from the forest mist, no matter as they tear us, root first, shaking until the soft soil that clung to nodules held us warm, lets go and falls away. I watch as my people continue to be displaced within our own homelands, and you cannot take all the jungle with you. Our people and our relations are dying, like a star slow fading into Creator's dark web. What we do today will decide the future for all those who have yet to come. Next slide. Hawaii and our practices and resiliency in the face of tremendous challenges are just one beacon amongst a constellation of Native peoples within the US who remain resilient in the face of rapid climatic development and agricultural change. As of the 2017 USDA census, there are almost 80,000 agriculture producers who identify as American Indian or Alaska Native, majority of these living in Western and Plain states. This number is probably an underestimate the US Farm Service shares. These Native producers are more likely to be female and younger than US producers overall on average. The average size of a farm or ranch operated by Native peoples is 200% larger than the national size average. And the lands that they manage accounts for more than 6% of US farmland. I see these producers and gatherers and the wider Native communities to which they belong as refuges within the sea of change. I'd like to introduce the Hawaiian concept of kipuka to describe this quality. Next slide. In the Hawaiian language, this term directly translates to variation or change of form, a puka or a hole, as a calm place in a high sea, a deep place in a shoal, opening in a forest, openings in cloud formations, and especially a clear place or oasis in a lava bed where there may be vegetation. This term, kipuka, takes on a plurality of meanings depending on the context and speaker, and many may refer to a variety of cultural and or ecological occurrences. Tai Kavika Tengen has described kipuka as sites to provide biological and cultural regeneration and as zones of indigenous growth in materialities, connectivities, and mana. Mana refers to spirit or power, the spiritual underpinning of all Hawaiian entities. Mana extends from living, typically thought of biotic entities to others such as rain, sea salt, or stones. And above else, these kipuka are refuges with the potential to harbor many mana-bearing entities and act as safe places for pockets of biocultural abundance to persist. Biocultural abundance occurs when culturally grounded, place-based communities and their intimately entangled environments, ecologies, and the species that make their life ways within thrive together and not despite their entanglements, but because of them. Biocultural abundance exists in states of apparent surplus, as well as in times of fragmentation or regeneration, as communities persist in resilience and cultivate abundances of practice and life ways that continue to shape, cultivate, and ultimately co-produce landscapes. I'm going to highlight just 2 kipuka within Native country that embody resilient lifeways and climatic adaptation. Next slide. I met earlier this year with Hopi elder Nadine Manuel, who spoke of Hopi growing practices within corn amidst climates of increasing drought and reduced groundwater. The southwestern region of the US is experiencing periods of prolonged drought, predicted to become more arid in future years. the USDA has designated natural disaster areas across large portions of Arizona due to severe drought conditions. Auntie Nadine shared with me the role of corn within their families, practices, and ceremony. First, she spoke of weddings. The bride-to-be must offer a meal to the husband-to-be's family, offering piki bread, a blue corn pastry, paper-thin bread, blue cornmeal, white cornmeal, and sweet cornmeal to the groom's family, where she grinds corn for his family while they make her kipa, her wedding robes. Corn is central to Hopi life, and if you have that, that's considered wealth, she shared. Hopi practices were designed and practiced without irrigation, adapted to the high desert area for their people. Each corn plant, as shown here, are planted 3 feet apart from the others to ensure access to groundwater. Each plant is cared for individually, the grower constantly in prayer, song, and dance with a good heart. This planting style has become increasingly challenging with declining water tables. What used to be is not there anymore, Nadine shared. The farmers must plant deeper. There's less rainfall. Very seldom you'll see somebody that really succeeds. This has tremendous consequences for ceremony, and I'd like to share her direct words. So I quote, "Because we don't have water, so everybody has to be in prayer, and there's various times in our calendar where we have to humble ourselves and be quiet. And those are the times where people meditate, and those are the times that people are in prayer, because we're praying for water so that we could survive and live longer. And with that comes ceremony, and we do dancing. We sing. All of our songs are about rain. The rain's coming. It's coming. It's thundering. It's lightning. You can see it. The clouds are gathering. They're coming this way from the north, the south. There's songs with all those words, and all of them have something to do with rain or snow all the time. Without that water, there's no life. Our own people, the Hopi people, are losing their faith in prayer, and they are losing their faith in who they are." I share this because I want to make the point that climate never stands alone as a separate issue within Native communities, but is entangled with ways of life, culture, and health. The water is within us. Climate is inseparable from culture, and one cannot measure culture. Next slide. The final kipuka that I'll discuss today is the Kalispel tribe, a leader in the restoration of relations of wildlife that has been tremendously impacted by development, habitat fragmentation, and climate. The Kalispel Department of Natural Resources has made it their mission to provide tribal members with an opportunity to engage in the same cultural practices as their ancestors. Their programs to restore habitat and biocultural abundances extend from their bison herd to Selkirk caribou and to their native cutthroat trout. Next slide. When I visited the Kalispel in Eastern Washington this past August, I was able to visit Raymond Osley, a Shoshone-Bannock fisheries biologist. Raymond spoke of the plight of the native cutthroat trout. To quote Ray, "The fish are battling a consistent war we can't see. These little warriors are hanging in strong. As a biologist, it's a joy to help, identifying the progress, all to make sure for future generations we can have the same joy as we do." And so I just want to share this. Raymond showed us the handmade beaded headdress that he makes to honor the cutthroat trout, I have a hard time saying that, as warriors, as relations worthy of honor and allies within changing climates and landscapes. And so next slide, I'd like to close with the image and metaphor of Kaunaoa Pehu. I was only able to share, Hawaii, Hopi, and then the Kalispel tribe as different kipuka, but those are just 3 amongst a wide sea of other kipuka across the United States. But here, Kaunaoa Pehu is a parasitic vine that grows similar to maile within our forest kipuka. The plant is highly valued by our healing practitioners for its medicinal use, particularly in use in birthing. It's also used in lei making. In our creation chant, this plant is tied as the guardian in partnership to its marine counterpart, the vermitid snail, we know as Kaunaoa. These 2 together represent the high levels of connectivity and interdependence that our ancestors observed and acknowledged within our ecologies. We are all in each our kipuka, land and sea, island communities or continents related. Like each the terrestrial and marine konaoa, we cannot establish, thrive, or exist without a foundation upon which to ground ourselves. Since this is for the Global Research Alliance, I'd like to end by saying that research on Native lands needs to be done with and by Native people for Native peoples and lands in ways that reaffirm and are fundamentally driven by Indigenous data sovereignty, that empower Native peoples to be in the driver's seats of the futurities of all their relations. And when this is done right, climate is honored as ceremony, as fundamentally a part of all of our relations, our families, human and non-human persons. And I'm excited to see Native people highlighted on a global stage to share their biocultural abundances, lifeways, and resiliencies in the face of tremendous change. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you having me.
Oh, pēnā koe, Gina. He mihi kawana kia koe, tauke. Words can't express. Thank you so much for sharing. And we're just really honoured to be able to sit here and hear about kipuka and, you know, some of the key points around culture, ecology, and climate change. They're all intertwined, and we've really heard that throughout your presentation and the importance of maintaining that. So, nō reira he mihi kia koe. Thank you so much for that. Excuse me, guys. I'm just going to have a bit of a cough.
And I have my email on the next slide if anybody wants to get in touch about anything. Very available for that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yes, that would be really good. We'll be in touch too for the IRN. So just moving on to our next guest speaker. So now I'd like to introduce you to Gilmer David Umachi Diaz. Gilmer is a young Indigenous leader from the native Benahima community of the Shipibo Konibo people in the city of Pucallpa, located in the Ucayali region in Peru. He is currently a psychology student at the National University of Ucayali and volunteers with the NGO Barry Westner, where he is involved in activities and focus on empowering the local community, preserving their customs and culture, and participating in reforestation efforts. Nō reira, nau mai haere mai, Gilmer. Welcome, Gilmer.
Hello everyone, Gilmer. My Shipibo Konibo name is Runembari, means guy of water. And as you can see in the title, I'm also going to talk about Indigenous Research Network, where I'm going to focus on reforestation and the Fedi has on native communities. I hope you enjoyed this short presentation. So, first point I'm going to talk about is the impact of climate change on Indigenous people's traditional way of life. So, climate change disrupts the traditional way of life in Indigenous communities by altering weather patterns, affecting food sources and food security, and damaging ecosystems. They have serious consequences for cultural practice, livelihoods, and the intergenerational transmission of knowledge. In addition to this, we have also food loss and waste. So also exacerbate the climate change crisis. Reducing food loss and waste along the supply chain from production to consumption is essential to improving food security. Next slide, please. And then we have health impacts of climate change on Indigenous populations. Indigenous communities are the most affected by the health effects of climate change. These include malnutrition due to disrupted food systems, mental health problems resulting from community disorders, unlimited access to health infrastructures. Here I want to mention an important point, and that's that many times I've had worked with Indigenous children who, instead of playing, have to go to work in the city to get food, and that consumes a lot of energy. Energy that a child should spend playing with his friends and not working, because maybe the plants where they get food cannot give them fruits or vegetables because of climate change. Next slide, please. The next point is loss of biodiversity and natural resources. Climate change accelerates the loss of biodiversity and natural resources that Indigenous peoples depend on for survival. changes in habitats, water scarcity, deforestation, alter ecosystems, endangered wildlife, deplete essential resources needed for the livelihoods and cultural practice. Next slide, please. Here I want to talk about the role of economies and organizations in reforestation efforts. Here we have 3 points: government policies, NGO collaborations, and corporate responsibility. On the government policies, we have here we have discuss the crucial role of economies in creating supportive policies and regulations could facilitate reforestation activities. On NGO collaborations, we can explore fruitful partnerships between non-governmental organizations and local communities to promote reforestation initiatives. And the last one is corporate responsibility. Here we can examine the effort of social responsible companies that contribute to reforestation effort as part of their sustainability commitments. Next slide, please. Here I want to talk about the NGO Bariwasna. NGO Bariwasna is a non-profit intercultural civil organization based in the department of Ucayali, Peru. It's inspired by the cosmovision of the Amazonian people, and its main objective is to contribute to the strengthening of regional development processes through the empowerment of local actors, particularly women and indigenous populations, in order to contribute to the conservation of Amazonian ecosystems. Here we have a program called Sustainable Amazonian Forests. The objective of this is to restore and conserve the capacity to provide goods and service of natural forests that have been affected by deforestation, causing loss of forest cover, biodiversity, ecosystem imbalance, and damaging the cultural matrix of Amazonian indigenous communities. The implementation of the program is based on regulatory instruments approved by the Peruvian government for the management of natural resources and the application of environmental responsible practice to conserve the healthy state of the managed species. You can find our page on Instagram and Facebook, and then you can check the information if you want to. Next slide, please. Okay, so on the last slide is going to be about the benefits of reforestation of climate change based on the Bariwasna's program. So a couple of weeks ago, not really, it's going to be a month ago, essential material will deliver as part of the reforestation project called landscape restoration in the communities of Huánuco and Loreto, which is being carried out in the Shipibo-Conibo communities in Raboya, Alfonso Ugarte, Porvenir, located in the Loreto region. So the timber species selected for this initiative are mahogany, bolaina, quinilla, Wairuro, Pachaco, all of which are of great importance to the ecosystems and the livelihoods of the local communities. So it was a really short presentation, but to finish this, because I have to go back to class, I would like Shiloh to present the video that I gave her. So here you will see in detail the work that Bariwasna is doing with reforestation. That's all for now. Here, thank you for your attention. I hope you're doing well. Take care.
Thank
Ngā
you,
mihi
Gilma.
Gilma.
As Gilma has said, he actually has an exam at university right now. So I'm going to play this video for him, and then we'll move on to our short break.
Y nata oportunidad nuna kira ani daro tia ulki na kubadi tia noa meniku tira oportunidad más ya de que como nato gema de Alfonso Ugarte usted cargo ya de que de haskare nato gari tia de que ya eligen kana nato no gema Alfonso Ugarte como agente municipal de nato gema Alfonso Ugarte. Gracias nato proyecto Bariwasna que ita bersiraka gay a diretiva o no que haskra o que bendición parte tengo no que marco primeira vez que nato proyecto no a o que no já que no
muy contento con algunos pobladores de la comunidad y después de más de 30 y tantos años nunca se ha visto que era proyecto de reforestación en el distrito de Palmar, especialmente en Ugarte y nato en una Ishamalarute porque nato la última toma aquí en Chiqui no la van a picar, ¿no? Entonces yo creo que esta buena mayoría hasta el peor a visita de Mato como equipo técnico o responsable de varios, ¿no? Y ponen 100% y con se llama que no se llama no aquí no hay única no hay lugar meeting permanente y algo que no muy agradecido la población.
Muchas veces no papamos, no necesitamos nosotros pero no un acto proyecto no es de nada porque ahí va a generar trabajo que no caso no vamos por no agente coordinado toda la universidad tanto tecnológico toda la escuela necesita no cobran dado y aquí nuestro entero no hay nada bueno que es atana hasta no hay tiempo dado y no
Thank you. Over to you, Kat.
Oh, tēnā koe Gilma. All the best with your exam. We're sending our prayers to you right now, but thank you so much. I think, just hearing the stories and from the Shipibo Kunibo peoples and the importance of reforestation, but also the importance of communities being involved, leading that space, and basically being that change, but also reinforcing our traditional knowledge. Nō reira he mihi atu kia koe, Gilma. Mō tō kōrero i tēnei rā. Thank you so much, Gilma. So moving on to our next guest speaker. I would like to, right now we've got a small change to our agenda. And basically, unfortunately, Gilma won't be here for the Q&A, but if you have any questions for him, please put them in the chat and we can forward them to him. So right now we'll have a 10-minute break. During this break, we're going to play our Indigenous Research Network video. If you miss the video itself or go off and have your coffee, snack, stretch, basically it's on our website as well. So please feel free to come back for our next amazing speakers, and I'll hand it over to Charlotte and Joe.
Cool. So as she said, welcome to go grab a coffee, stretch, whatever. But I'm going to play this video if you would like to watch.
Mā ngā mātauranga o ona mata, e kōkiri whakamua ai te ana mata. The wisdom of our ancestors drives innovation for the future. The Indigenous Research Network was established in 2021 to help empower traditional Indigenous practices to be used in our fight against climate change. Our aim is to build global capacity, help overcome barriers and career pipelines for Indigenous peoples, and use traditional knowledge and methods of learning to build capability for today and for future generations. In Te Ao Māori, the role of tikanga and kaua is crucial as kaitiaki of te tai ao.
Tēnā koutou katoa, sincere greetings to us all. He uri a hau no rangitāne tamaki nui arua, ati hau nui a paparangi, me ngati rangi nui hoki. So I'm from the Indigenous peoples of New Zealand of Rangitane, ati hau nui a paparangi, and ngati rangi nui. Ko Mavis Mullins a hau, my name is Mavis, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings to us all. So in our farming enterprises, we often refer to our decision making as being just mokopuna decisions or grandchild decisions. This is about the forward looking, not necessarily the now. So with our grandchildren, every day is a learning day on farm, whether it's about the flow of the water, whether it's about the climate and the impact that that has, whether or not it's about how we actually manage our own behaviours in regards to landfill and waste. And in fact, it's just that constant reinforcement of our impact, our behaviours, our values on land and climate. Those are the tools.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi kia koutou I te whānau e ngā hau e whā. Ko maunga puatu e raua ko titirangi ngā maunga, ko tauranga raua ko uawa ngā awa, ko tūhoi raua ko Ngāti Parau ngā iwi, ko Pānia ki ngā hau. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Hello and welcome everyone from all four winds of the world. My name is Pānia King and my ancestors hail from the rivers and the mountains of Ngāti Parau and Tūhoi. If you are supporting extension with whenua Māori compared to other farmers in Aotearoa, we may have different achievements, visions and outcomes compared to others. So to understand that component of the mahi is really important, and also to understand the connection that Māori have with the whenua, how we whakapapa to the waterways, to our land, to Papatuanuku, and how we strive to always be good kaitiaki for Papatuanuku and our waterways and our moana as well. They're all intertwined and they all weave into the one plan that we are trying to achieve as Māori and support and look after our land and waterways. So if you're understanding how important our culture is to us and how we grow our food, how we look after our land, how we raise our children, our culture in our communities, how we pass on the knowledge from our kaumātua down to our rangatahi, so we're knowing that that knowledge is being passed on and not dying with them, is part of te ao Māori when it comes to my extension mahi.
Tēnā rā koutou katoa, ko aroha puke tapu taku ingoa. E uri au hau no te atiawa, no runga I te rangi ki te upuko o tika Māui, me Ruapani ki Wakare Moana. Kia ora everyone, my name is Aroha Puketapu. I am a descendant from the iwi Te Atiawa here in Wellington and Ruapani in Wakare Moana, the North Island. Tēnā rā koutou katoa. So it's important for rangatahi Māori to understand their place here in Aotearoa. Oftentimes rangatahi are disconnected because they've grown up in an urban environment and away from the land and the taiao. However, once you're able to bring them back to that place of ownership about who they are, then you can start to engage them in the concept of kaitiakitanga. And that is for Māori being a steward of the environment. These are the things that are really important in the conversation about climate, in the conversation about the environment, and in a conversation about sustainability. Rangatahi who are disconnected from te ao Māori need someone to guide them. And that someone needs to do it with kindness and love. And so this kaupapa of the taiao and climate is a kaupapa of love, because it's about looking after the future mokopuna, future generations, our future environment. Now, if rangatahi aren't connected to that, they're going to go and do their own thing. And so, capturing that is important, but the way in which you capture them is more important, because that'll keep them in, that'll make them stay, and that'll make them act. Kaitiakitanga is based on a love. It's a conversation of love and kindness.
Indigenous communities have a close relationship with the land and have well-established traditional knowledge systems and methods of learning. The Indigenous Research Network will provide a platform to share knowledge and advance collaborative research using the power of traditional systems. Aotearoa and Samoa co-lead the Indigenous Research Network and would like to warmly invite the participation and ideas from Indigenous communities through their GRA membership to build climate resilience. Tihei, Mauri ora.
Thank you very much.
Kia ora koutou, welcome back. Hopefully you're refreshed and back for our next round of guest speakers today. We have some more incredible keynote speakers coming up from Australia, Ahitereiria, and Aotearoa, New Zealand. So I'd like to kick back into introducing our next guest speaker, Benson Saulo. Benson is a descendant of the Wemba Wemba, Gunditjmara Aboriginal nations of Western Victoria and Ireland province in Papua New Guinea. Benson has a background in banking, economic development, and social impact, which provides a strong foundation for his role as managing partner at the First Australians Capital. In 2011, Benson was appointed as the Australian Youth Representative to the UN, United Nations, in which he undertook a national engagement tour to gain a deeper understanding of issues impacting Australian youth. Benson was named National NAIDOC Youth of the Year in 2014 and a finalist for Young Australian of the Year, VIC, Victoria, and the Human Rights Medal for Youth by the Australian Human Rights Commission. So we're honoured to have you here, Benson, and look forward to your presentation. No mai haere mai, Benson. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And I just want to acknowledge all the speakers as well, and just pass on my appreciation for all your continued work and efforts to drive positive change across your communities. My name is Benson Saulo, and it's such an honour to be here today to talk about the power of inclusivity. And I just want to acknowledge the Indigenous Research Network and thank you for sharing that video as well, and just your work around strengthening Indigenous voices globally on agricultural issues, as well as being able to amplify traditional practices and knowledge to really combat climate change that's really impacting a lot of our communities. And as has been acknowledged by our speakers, is that Indigenous people are at the forefront of this fight against climate. It is not only impacting the ecological sustainability, but it's also impacting our cultural continuity and also our knowledges that we strive to pass on and maintain for generations to come. I grew up in a small town in Australia here called Tamworth, and it's known as an aside as the country music capital of Australia, which we're very proud of. It's on the traditional lands of the Gomeroi people, and we were surrounded by really beautiful and powerful elders, and a lot of our elders were the ones that were the first to set up our legal services and our medical and health services, and also our childcare services. In fact, Birali Childcare is still established and running today, and it's a place where our young people can go and learn culture and learn language. They used to share with us a beautiful story about the Warrnambool, and the Warrnambool is it translates to the great river in the sky, or what we would refer to as the Milky Way. And if you've ever had the chance, as I'm sure many of you have, to be able to get out of these concrete jungles that we live and work in often, and look up upon the Milky Way, it looks like this very smoky river that runs through the night sky. And the story says that our ancestors have camped by the great river in the sky and lit fires to be able to signal to our spirits that when we pass away, that we can return home and sit by the great river in the sky and reflect on the life that we've just had. Those late night philosophical conversations, those really deep and meaningful connections that we've been able to form with friends, family, and loved ones. And then when it's our time to return back to this cycle of life that's been going on for 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 years, that we come in the form of shooting stars. And the shooting star lands and lays within Mother Earth. And then when we're born, it's not so much this idea of conception. It's more around this notion of your spirit choosing who you're meant to be in the time that you're meant to exist. And as a young person growing up and being constantly told this story, and as a young person, you kind of go, all right, aunt, we've got it, the Warrnambool. But as we grew up and kind of reflected on this story, and this, it really established this notion of a sense of purpose, that we're here sharing the same cycle with our friends and peers, but then also the people that we engage and interact with around the world are also sharing the same cycle. And it also establishes this sense of the urgency of now, that this belief that we share the same short moment in life, and that it's the challenges that we face are the challenges that we're meant to face. And often it's not for us to solve, it's for us to be able to move things through to a new stage, a new precipice, to for the next generation to be able to come through and to be able to take up those challenges and carry them forward. And um and and so when I think about the experiences that I've had, and I'll be able to share some of those with you all in a moment. Um, that this idea that we're actually custodians, and that we are carriers of everything that's come before us, and it's our duty and our responsibility to really continue that, to pass it on for future generations, to be able to create that pathway for them to step into. And that's why I'm really pleased to really talk about this notion of the power of inclusivity. But before I do, that notion, or that idea of the cycle that we're all on, and we are where we are today because of what's come before us. It's actually with that I want to acknowledge that I'm standing and working on the lands of the Bunurong people, that have lived and cared for the lands here in Melbourne, Australia, for thousands and thousands of years. I'd like to acknowledge my own family, which are connected to four nations. Katarina, I decided not to include the four nations because it's quite lengthy, but and you did very well with Gunditjmara as well. So there's the Wemba Wemba, Jarawa Jale, Wiragai, and Gunditjmara. And then also my father's side from New Island province in Papua New Guinea, hails from a very small village called Lafu. And I'm very proud that both my children carry names of where my father and my grandfather and my grandmother are from. So my son is Eli Valpale, and Valpale is a Lavongai name from a very small village called Nekonomon, where my grandfather comes from. And my daughter carries the middle name Ramor, which is her grandmother times 5, which connects her directly to the lands where our village is from, Lafu. And it's something that we value, and it's that notion of looking back to look forward, and the importance of carrying the memories and the histories of our people forward, and sustaining our stories for future generations. I've been very fortunate over the last few years, and to be able to work with young people, as Katarina mentioned, I was appointed the Australian Youth Representative to the United Nations back in 2011. I feel like I've dropped off the youth curve in recent years as a 35-year-old. But that particular experience um, was quite incredible. So my background, I'd been in banking since the age of 15. I worked as a bank teller, moved all the way through into business banking as a 19-year-old, a university dropout, finished up within one of our major 4 banks here in Australia. Uh, as a business analyst, and I was actually at a cultural event in northeast Arnhem Land, which is right up north of Australia, and very yeah, it's the lands of the Gumatj people. And I remember sitting up there and talking about the importance of culture and connection, and and clear as day, I had this realization that the bank had become a safety blanket, and I needed to look beyond that. And I'd been in the bank for about 7 years at that time. I was about 22, and and a few months later, receiving the same email 3 times, I decided to apply for the role of Australian Youth Representative to the United Nations. And there was about 300 people that applied that year. They take one person, and I was fortunate to be appointed into that role. And what that entailed is that I raised about $40,000 to undertake a national engagement tour. And so my goal was to really engage young people to understand what issues impact them, but then also what impact do they want to have on the world. And I visited over 24 communities across Australia, from urban to remote to very remote, jumping on small planes, which I vowed I'll probably never do again, flying into a storm off the coast of Australia in a small 4-seater plane, and really working with young people around this idea of, you know, what really drives you, what issues impact you, and that notion of what impact do you want to have on the world. And there was some really powerful learnings that year, and really there was 3 key standouts. The first one was around, is the education system preparing young people more broadly, young people for the world that they are going to ultimately inherit? The second one was the impacts of mental health and the stigma around discussing mental health. And again, this was going back nearly 10 years, and it's still, yeah, these challenges and issues are still prevalent in our communities today. And then the third one was around climate change. So as our speakers have mentioned before, not only the ecological challenges, but then there's really deep questions that young people are asking of themselves and of their communities in regards to, what world am I growing up into, and what world am I going to be raising a family in? And it's these deeper questions that have really sparked, particularly here in Australia, but across the Pacific, young people to stand up and to take action and realize that, um, you that change is a matter of choice, and that it's not a matter of chance. Is that we actually need to step up into our power, and our voices as a collective to be able to sit at the table to shape decisions that are impacting our communities today and into the future. During that trip, during those travels, it was really gaining an insight around the importance of lived experience, before being based across in New York and leading negotiations on behalf of Australia on 2 resolutions. The first one was around the rights of the child, with a focus on children with disabilities, and then the second one was around the impacts of the global financial crisis on young people. The focus there, and this is really drawing on the experience previously of doing the engagement tour, was the importance of establishing entrepreneurial skills and transferable skills for young people, and particularly young Indigenous people that were, um, you know, more often than not being left behind at an education standpoint, but then also in more regional and remote settings as well. So looking at how young people can really drive opportunities within their own communities. So the 3 really key takeaways from that year was really the power of storytelling, the importance around cultural connection and building that community around you, but really underpinning that with cultural values around respect and humility, and then also that notion of being able to step into your power, that you are the sum total of everything that come before you, from the good, the bad, the ugly, and the brilliant. That it's really on us to own that and step into spaces. And then also the importance of listening to understand, that it's not just about listening to speak or just speaking. It's a very important cultural piece, particularly when we're talking in regards to intergenerational engagement, that idea of listening to understand. I talked more around the lived experience being such a powerful tool and expression for impact, as well as an area that I think really has great crossover around ecological and sustainability, is around systems thinking and bringing the lived experience into the way that we're thinking about community engagement, community participation, but also putting and having community driving, not just participating, that actually being in the driver's seat for that. And then an element that I absolutely love is this idea of curiosity. And I'll touch more on that in a moment. And on the back of the time at the UN, I came back to Australia, and one thing that was really evident is that young Indigenous voices were being left out of discussions at a national level as well as an international level. And we have seen that shift and change over time. However, during at that time, there was a really lack. It was a clear lack and void for a space for Indigenous people. And so I was fortunate to develop and lead as the co-founder of sorry as the director of the National Indigenous Youth Leadership Academy. And the focus there was really developing the next generation of leaders passionate about climate change, passionate about social issues, including suicide prevention, mental health, and recognition of Indigenous people and our rights. And we've undertook national you know, workshops and events, and in the space of 2 years we launched 10 youth-led social action campaigns on issues that really impact people. And the key thing that we really learned from this is the importance of establishing a sense of purpose, building networks with peers, cross-generational people with diverse skills and perspectives, and then underpinning that with the skills and cultural connection. That's and these were some really critical aspects of being able to grow that generation or that cohort of young leaders coming through together, that were connected, that were passionate about issues, and that also had the actual tools to be able to shape change and not only have a seat at the table, but have the means to actually participate, and the tools and the systems thinking behind them in regards to shaping change, which is often slow, which is often incremental, and takes persistence and the other intangible element of grit. And so during this time, it was there was a greater shift that was happening in regards to what was happening across our economy and across our communities in regards to greater recognition of the importance of Indigenous people's perspectives being embedded into policies, as well as into initiatives being led by ourselves. And the 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 great movement that has really taken place in Australia has been around our reconciliation journey. And reconciliation is not only about policies and approaches that really, which is then flowing into how do we actually drive initiatives and provide access to capital to be able to not just keep things in academia, not just to keep things in organizations, but actually take them out and test, try and learn in regards to initiatives that we are driving at a community level, but then also a national and international level. And there's been many great pieces of progress, but there's also been a lot of setbacks. And just to give a little bit of context, it was not until 1993 that the idea of terra nullius, which is no man's land, was actually dispelled. And so there's a landmark case called the Mabo decision, or Mabo versus the High Court, in which there was recognition that Indigenous people lived here and existed and had cultural connections to the lands prior to 1788. And so this is in recent history. So there's been a significant amount of unlearning that's been needed to take place. And then also relearning in regards to affirming self-determination, affirming sovereignty, but then also empowering people's voices to be able to step into spaces and to be drivers of their own destiny. As you may have picked up in the conversation, it's been very I haven't touched a lot on climate change, and I think Dr. Maguire really captured it beautifully when she said, climate is not in isolation. It's entangled with land, culture, and health. And when I think about the importance of developing and growing and supporting leaders for the next generation and providing the spaces for them to participate, is that when we really affirm self-determination, it's not only the ability to participate, but it's also the ability to have choice as to how they choose to participate. And I can hand on heart say, in regards to the young people that I've been fortunate to work with over the many years, is that climate change is front and center. Ecological health is front and center, and then ensuring that culture and continuity is actually underpinning all of our actions that we take in regards to shaping the future for the next generations. And so the I think in regards to I wanted to kind of cover off a little bit around this importance around access to capital, and then maybe there's another separate conversation there. But I think if I kind of move to, what's our role? What's our role as leaders in this space, and how do we ensure that we are really upholding self-determination, that we are really supporting young people to develop and grow into young leaders? The call to action here is really the importance of creating spaces for young people to connect. Our young people at when I was running the National Indigenous Youth Leadership Academy felt isolated. The ability to be able to bring people together to connect at a cultural level, at a values level, and then also at a level of purpose was really powerful. And this notion of really sustaining impact is being able to connect with people that can actually be on that journey with you. The second one is really creating that seat at the table, but not just about pulling up another seat. It's actually enabling people to fully participate. So that is the skills, the tools, the processes, but then also shifting the way that the table is actually constructed to make it more inclusive for young people. An element of that is also really elevating young people's voices and highlighting the power of lived experiences. So in Australia, we talk about freshwater, saltwater communities, mountain desert communities, and it's really important that these different perspectives come together in the sense of there's a common purpose that we're striving for, but there's value in each of those experiences and unique experiences. And then also this is the bit around access to capital, or the means to fully participate, is not just seed ideas with tools, but to actually seed it with money and the support needed to be able to enable young people to be able to test, to be able to try, to be able to fail, to be able to learn, because ultimately there's no blueprint here. It's that notion of looking back to look forward. That also is iterative in regards to how innovation needs to work. And so we need to empower our young people with the tools of innovation, so they can actually step into the unknown with a new way of thinking, underpinned with culture, underpinned with responsibility and respect, but as the true custodians as they step into the unknown. And so I just want to leave those kind of words with you in regards to, it's really our responsibility as leaders in our respective spaces to lean in and to step back and to enable voices of young people and their lived experiences to come to the table. So thank you very much.
Oh, tēnā koe, Benson. Oh, tēnā te mihi kia koe. He mihi mai o hā kia koe mō kōrero. Thank you so much. Where to start? I wish I could summarize that wonderful kōrero, but you just really captured so much of the struggles that we can all relate to. And also, as you say, as a whole, the holistic side of our mental health, our education systems are lacking of it, our cultural identities, our ancestral knowledge, just amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, and the opportunities that you've had being able to guide a lot of our youth in that space, and sharing the ancestral knowledge and being able to find that space. And, when you speak about, when you look at learning, so in Te Reo Māori, we have a word called ako, and ako has a dual meaning, or akonga, and you're both learning and teaching at the same time. And so I think that you've really just an amazing kōrero or speech about a heartfelt journey that I think that around the world, our Indigenous communities can relate. And also, just as you guys spoke about, our governments, our policies are always siloed, and it comes down to the appropriations, and sometimes you lose sight. And this is the part that the IRN, or the Indigenous Research Network, really aims to look at: how do we bring those components together rather than isolating them in spaces of climate change, etc. So, thank you so much, Benson. He mihi kawana kia koe. So coming up next, everyone, we have our guest speaker, Cheyenne Wilson. So he mihi kawana kia Cheyenne. Last but not certainly least, of course, so Cheyenne is a descendant of iwi, of two iwi, Ngai Tūhoi and Ngāti Awa. Cheyenne is the founder and managing director of Te Kaharangi Hono, a specialist Māori agribusiness and whenua Māori consulting firm. She is a Bachelor of Environment and Society from Lincoln University. She is a trustee for the charities Meet the Need and Lean On a Gate, a governance group member for our Land and Water National Science Challenge, and a council member for Moka Tangata People, Food and Fibre Workforce Development Council. Cheyenne was the first chair of He Tātai Rangahua, the Food and Fibre Youth Council, a finalist in the Ahu Whenua Young Māori Farmer of the Year Award for Dairy in 2018. She mentors and supports rangatahi Māori, so young Māori people, in the food and fibre industries. Nō reira, nau mai haere mai Cheyenne. Ngā mihi.
Tarina, ngā mihi koutou katoa. Thank you for having me. Kia koutou katoa. Hello to you all. Ko mauna po atu me putuake nā mauna. I hail from the beautiful mountains, Mauna Pohatu in Te Uruwera and Putawaki. Ko tauranga me rangataiki ngā awa. My rivers are the Tauranga and Rangataiki. Ko mā tātua te waka. My whānau voyaged here on the Matatua canoe. Ko Tūhoi me Ngāti Awa ngā iwi. Tūhoi Ngāti Awa are my tribes. Ki noho au ki te tairawhiti. So I live here in Gisborne. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So greetings to you all. I want to acknowledge Ngāti Porou and Ngāti Kahungunu and whānau across Aotearoa who have been impacted by the severe weather events over the past couple of years. And I want to acknowledge those who have lost whānau, and my thoughts and prayers are with you all. I want to mihi and acknowledge Ngāti Porou, the people of this land, who have adopted me as one of their own and made me feel like I've landed on my feet here in Tairawhiti, Gisborne. So for those of you who are not familiar with the tribal boundaries within New Zealand, my iwi, my tribes are neighbours of Ngāti Porou. So this is me. I'm a farmer, a food producer, and someone who showed up to help post-cyclone. And much like Shiloh, I'm the only person in a generation in my whānau, my family, who has a university degree, and was given the opportunity to study. I came to Gisborne with the expectation of helping for a couple of weeks post cyclone, and as you'll see, I'm still here. We're 8 months and counting on, and I'm hoping by the time I finish my presentation, you'll understand why. So what happens when the lights go out, when there's no power, no communications, no digital banking, and there's isolation? It's hard to deny climate change when it's knocking on your front door, or in some cases, it's knocking down the front door. Next slide, please. February the 14th will be forever etched in the memories of those across Te Ika Māui, the North Island of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Not because of Valentine's Day, but because of Cyclone Gabrielle. I was living in the Bay of Plenty, around 3.5 hours drive away from Gisborne when Cyclone Gabrielle struck. My property over there had been hit by Cyclone Hale only a month prior to Gabrielle. When I woke on the 15th of February, I had no way of communicating with people I knew within the impacted areas of Kairawhiti, of the lands of the Ngāti Porou, whānau of our Ngāti Porou people, and of Ngāti Kahungunu people. With the little information that I had from outside of the region, I made some assumptions that food and water would be needed and help would be needed. I spent 4 days at home baking. It was my therapeutic way of handling the fact that I couldn't get on the ground yet to help. I was packing up my car. I threw my tent in my car, threw my gumboots, my boots, my overalls, and I was ready to go as soon as the road opened. And when I got to Gisborne, this is what I found. The impacts of Cyclone Gabriel on our food systems are major. Cyclone Gabriel highlighted some real areas of concern, and it highlighted the gaps and deficiencies in the systems that we operate. In 2023, we find ourselves in a cashless society. So what do you do when you have no cash, you have no banks, the ATMs are down, and you watch a system that can put food back on a shelf that you can't access? From what I saw, it meant leaning on others. It meant leaning on those around you, but having to lean into systems that discriminate against Indigenous for far too long can be a really difficult step to take when you're met with judgment. Next slide, please. So just to reiterate, this is what we saw. Here's a satellite image of an area in Tolaga Bay, which is just north of Gisborne, further up the coast. Now, here it is pre-cyclone, and this is post-cyclone. Now, just to reiterate, pre-cyclone and post-cyclone. So now we have, if we get a better quality image, and we zoom in on what looks like an orange spot in the middle of the screen there. Those are logs, debris, and slash that have been deposited on a farm in the middle of a paddock. That is what our farmers and growers on productive land are competing with. And in many areas around here, that silt and debris still lay where it landed. You're working in that environment, what happens? Next slide, please. So from what I saw, Indigenous communities support Indigenous communities. Sorry, the slide should change after this. I was fortunate enough to land in a distribution warehouse that had been stood up by the people of this land of Ngāti Porou. And here I saw the Indigenous people connect with their relatives who live outside of their tribal boundaries and connect with other tribal groupings to do what they needed to do to help people. They made decisions for the betterment of people, ignoring the barriers that were being created around them by the mechanisms, by the mainstream mechanisms. You'll note in these photos, there's a lot of volunteers. There's a lot of youth, there's a lot of teenagers who were impacted by the cyclone themselves, and they showed up to help their communities. I saw those with resources willing to share them with anyone and everyone, from providing communication devices and generators to help reconnect isolated communities, to giving the shirts off their backs for those who lost their homes and belongings. I saw privately owned enterprises flying aid into those in need. I saw them flying themselves into isolated communities to share information in a timely manner, in a time critical manner. When supply chains were disrupted, it was difficult to get food from the local store, and we saw the need to build resilience and system redundancies. We found that we have a reliance on systems that aren't fit for purpose, that aren't fit for us. Now, moving forward from that may take time, but at least we now know where we stand. Māori communities were the first to open their doors. Māori have always and will always wrap their arms around those in need. And I often say to my friends, if anything ever happens in your community, earthquake, cyclone, whatever, the first place you go is the marae. because you're either going to, you're always going to have kai there, you're always going to have hot water and showers and toilets, and there's always bedding. Everything is always there. And if you're not in need, you can help. And there's always a tea towel in the kitchen. If you come to our homes, if you come into our whare, we will always offer food. That is what we do. We show manaakitanga, we show generosity, aroha, love and care. And that's what most Indigenous communities will do, right? And this love that we show isn't limited to only other Māori. It is for everyone. The mahi and efforts undertaken in this warehouse reached all communities, all ethnicities. And Sir Selwyn Parata will always say, we will look after Ngāti Porou and those who choose to live amongst us. And that's what happened in this warehouse. Next slide, please. Now, here's a video that of a farm that was hit extremely hard by Cyclone Gabriel. It'll play for us. Now, what you can see here is a paddock in some places is buried under over 1 metre of silt. The fences on the other side of the paddock are gone. Stock have nothing to eat in here. Now, this footage was taken 3 months at least after the cyclone. You'll see here we have some grass silage bales. Now, these were donated from farmers outside of Tairāwhiti, farmers who recognised that there would be a need here. I helped coordinate 2,500 bales of grass silage into this region direct to impacted farmers, and this work continues now. Farmers outside of this region who had been impacted by other weather events, other devastating climatic events in the past years, had help from both people within Ngāti Porou and people across Aotearoa. And they were the ones to show up when the farmers here needed help. Now, the road to recovery isn't going to be easy or straightforward. But with Indigenous communities, such as the Ngāti Porou people who saw the barrier and created their own solution, here we see one of the routes, Highway 35, that Te Tairāwhiti is known for, that Ngāti Porou is known for, was broken in multiple places. And here is a main artery that was taken out. And Ngāti Porou saw this and found a solution. If we don't mind clicking again, please. And they built their own road across whenua Māori, across Māori-owned land, to reconnect communities, to reconnect people on the East Coast. Now, they recognised the strength of the communities and their whānau, the connections that they had with the people here, and they managed to put a road in to reconnect everyone. Now, we need to reconnect. We need to reconnect with our knowledge. We need to bring that forward. Reflecting on what the other presenters have mentioned, the wealth of knowledge of our Indigenous communities, the wealth of knowledge that they hold is invaluable. So going forward, I believe we need to lean into that. We need to bring that forward. There's many years of evidence that backs traditional practices of Māori. We need to utilise the vibrance and the excitement of our youth to solve the issues we're seeing in our environment. The legacy that's being left isn't great. And I believe our youth will be the ones that solve the issues that we see now. So thank you all very much. Thank you to all the other presenters. It's been great to hear from you all, and thank you for the opportunity. And I just want to reiterate that people in Te Tairāwhiti, in Gisborne, on the East Coast, in Hawke's Bay, cyclone is still a reality today, and they still need support. And I would like to see us continue to show love to them all. So thank you very much. Mihi.
Oh, he mihi kawana, Cheyenne, ka Mautiwihi. Thank you so much for your presentation and your kōrero around being whāngai to Ngāti Porou, and and you know, surrounding iwi around that rohinga. And you know, we were fortunate enough to go up to the East Coast as part of the international delegation. So a lot of your images and that kōrero came out from our people, our ahika in Ngāti Porou, and also with Ngāti Kahungunu and other iwi ngai tā manuhiri, runga whakaata, taitanga mahaki, my acknowledgement going out to all of our East Coast iwi te aitanga hauiti, different tribal communities that were impacted from the cyclone. Thank you so much for being there and being part of that movement to help our communities and you know, for right around Ngāti Porou and different iwi. And you know, it reminds me of the saying they had, e hara taku maunga hekurangi he maunga neke neke, he maunga tū tonu. So that means my mountain hekurangi does not move, it remains firm and steadfast. So when you see the communities that came together and how you've articulated that in your beautiful kōrero and your leadership of being home and you know, I've heard Benson, yourself, and talking about rural communities that get cut off, they have nothing, and many Indigenous communities that this is survival. It's not just a program around climate change, how do we reduce emissions, although that's one of our key points, but really the adaptation and the survival around how we progress forward is so important. How do we disseminate resources? How do we continue that into the future so that it's embedded rather than, I think Benson, you touched on it around resourcing, and not just seeding. I call them pilots. They look, you know, governments, policies are looking for, they always say, where's the research evidence that it works, before they'll commit funding. And I think what you said about other iwi, other tribal communities coming together to support, you know, our people in need in those communities was just profound. So thank you so much for all of your knowledge and the work that you continue to do in our East Coast Gisborne communities. I was born in Gisborne. My last name is Porou. So yeah, so I think that's something that we're honoured to have people like yourselves and everyone, all of our guest speakers involved with communities, with their research and bringing their knowledge together. So nō reira he mihi kawana, Cheyenne. Thank you so much. Kia ora. So moving on to our next part here, I just want to, because I know that we're running a bit over time, and I'm just going to reiterate, if you have any questions, to put them in the Q&A.
Under time, sorry. Under time, sorry.
Under time, sorry. We're way under time. But if you guys do have any questions, to put them in the Q&A rather than the chat. So if you could just push those in there and then we'll be able to discuss that further. And kind of some of the parts I want to touch on with the IRN and trying to do it a bit differently is our interactiveness, our face-to-face, our kōrero, and trying to look at ways that we can bring our storytelling, our peoples together, and I think motivate us. We get tired working in these spaces, and sometimes that motivation and that purpose that you know Benson talked about, we lose it when we're in our ivory towers. You know, we're going back to our day jobs, and I think that the ancestral knowledge can really play a part and how we speak. I just want to talk about a little experience about that. So in May, we had our very first IRN, International Research Network wānanga. We were blessed to go up the East Coast and stay on marae there. We had delegates from Samoa, Tonga, Fiji come along with us, and Thailand, cannot forget our Thailand whānau. And it was a very spiritual, moving journey. And one of the experiences, and it's just minute in the space, but it gave me a reminder of, you know, I work in government, I have for like the last 15, 20 years across different ministries. But at the time we had a really stressful moment. We had a kaumātua, Matua Waldo Hauia, native speaker in his language, one of our elders, and he sat with me And he could see I was quite stressed. We had all of our delegates coming through, and he started singing mōtiatia. So mōtiatia are old chants or ballads that we have in Te Reo Māori, and I couldn't quite understand what he was doing at the time because we were waiting for everyone to come off the plane, get everybody organised. And then he got me to start singing mōtiatia with him as we waited. And what I noticed at that period of time in a high stress level was that the calmness that came over, and he said to me, and he wouldn't speak English, so he'd got into an age now where he said to me, whakarongo ki te reo kia wai o taringa. So when we work in these places that don't have our language spoken, he said, you can feel the heart of your ancestors. So these old songs were actually the primary words of our ancestors, and they were passed down through generation to generation. And the calming effect was amazing. And I looked at him and I thought, because he was actually singing in the international airport area, mōtiatia, people were looking at us. But then I realized the effect of our tupuna. We had our tupuna around us. So, and I know everyone has those lived experiences where they sit with their elders and they feel that sense of purpose and what we're really here for. And it was perfect. You know, everything went so well. And that's some of the ancestral knowledge that comes to us that isn't a tangible, you know, return on investment. What's the profit? What's this part that isn't something that drives us, so to speak, or the commercialization of our knowledge. But, you know, it's looking about how do we look after our knowledge, data sovereignty, how do we ensure that we nurture that knowledge and we keep that safe within our communities. So just wanted to pass on that little story. So we're just honoured, and I'm totally grateful to everyone that's come on board, and basically moving on from our next part, how we can come together in the IRN, work together in the future, and really rekindle that, motivate each other, and know where we're heading is the right way to go, both from a Wairoa perspective, mind, body, and soul. And, you know, we're really honoured to have you all here. So essentially, this brings us to
Questions.
our last part of our last kind of section. And I just want to reiterate, thank you so much to our guest speakers. You know, you all captured very important parts of our communities and the work that you've all done. So I'd like to thank you all. And basically, you know, we're honoured to have you all here. So amazing presentations, amazing lived experiences. And now it's our time to hand it over to our audience. We're blessed to have had over 150 responses to want to attend from 44 different economies and communities around the world. So the interest is there, and essentially it's your guys' time to shine. So if you've got any questions, please do feel free to put them into the Q&A and we'll go from there. I'll just give you guys a couple of minutes. Shai, do you want to pick up on anything, or Joe?
Yep.
Actually, yes, Benson, if you want to have a bit of a kōrero, it'd be great.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you so much, Katarina, for sharing that. And the word that you used around rekindling, I think it's quite beautiful in the sense of, you know, what has been really happening across our communities here in Australia, and what really kind of is sparking this kind of thought is in regards to the cultural knowledge and the importance around language. So we have over 250 language groups in Australia. So we're essentially a nation of nations, and you know, this is both amazing. It's also challenging. And when we think about the impacts around colonization and suppression of language, you know, the beautiful thing that we've seen in recent years is that these languages are re-emerging, but it's quite interesting around that terminology around rekindling, because these languages never went away; they became whispers, and then over time those whispers have really grown, and it's amazing that an elder said to me on Wurundjeri country up in New South Wales, said you can't teach language without culture, and you can't teach culture without language. And one of the a powerful notion that we really embed in some of the work that we do is this idea of right capital, right time, and it actually comes from a cultural practice around right fire, and it's traditional methods of backburning. Australia is, we have really that impact a lot of our communities, and cultural practices have been around those backburning, so those safe fire practices to be able to germinate and grow and cultivate landscapes, but then also protect in dry, long months as well. So that idea of teaching language or rekindling language enables us to bring in cultural practices that actually have a positive impact for the wider community. And so that idea of right fire actually has flowed into this idea of right capital. So the right time within the right, the right purpose in regards to being able to support Indigenous entrepreneurs is something that we've been able to, be inspired by cultural practice and bring it into our practice in finance, which is quite powerful.
Thank you so much, Vincent. Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree. And I think bringing those connections together, both in finance, both our cultural entities, identities, and bringing that into full practice is going to be, a space moving forward for all of us. So, nō reira, ngā mihi nui kia koe. So now we have our Q&A. So our first question is to all of our speakers. How do you balance and integrate traditional knowledge and values with scientific knowledge and methods in your work? Does anyone want to kick off first?
I'm here to kick off. I guess I probably just want to start with saying that the degree that I got at university is a very broad degree, and it took me a very long time. And I will have to admit that I had to go to university as a mature student. I didn't get the grades. Well, I didn't finish school, so it was never an option when I left school. And so I probably struggled with Western science, or I struggled with the I guess the box that I was supposed to fit in regards to Western science. But I think when I consider our traditional values, it seems like social science is the only way that I can kind of marry it up a bit. And I guess in my mahi, because all of the stuff comes really naturally, showing manaakitanga and looking after people and being guardians of I guess the lands that we're on. And I think Benson mentioned it being custodians. I think it comes really naturally to us. We are people of the land. We come from the land, and so I think it's ingrained in what we do on a daily basis. So I find it sometimes quite a struggle to marry up with Western science. But when I consider social sciences, yeah, very easy to do.
Ngā mihi, thank you, Cheyenne. Absolutely. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass on the questions to each guest speaker. So I want to be able to get your guys' thoughts on all of those. So Gina.
Yeah, that was a really beautiful answer that Cheyenne just gave. So I guess my approach is really thinking about dual knowledge systems rather than binary. And so trying to think about, where does one complement the other? And then also shifting the narrative to, especially in my dissertation, I did mo'olelo, which is story as a method. And so just fundamentally acknowledging that our Indigenous methods are science and can stand up to and should be can be alone, separate, don't need to be paired with Western science all the time. And so I think just creating that level of I don't want to say respect, but just giving it that, labeling it, and saying this isn't an interview, or this isn't a walking interview or ethnography. This is my life as a Native Hawaiian woman, and that is method. And so I think just switching it around a little bit. But I think this is a really beautiful question, and I think also it's a beautiful question, because it's about your attitude when you come into the room. And so I used to come into the room and be like self-conscious a little bit, like, oh, I'm, bringing in Indigenous methods, and people aren't gonna think that they're as good maybe. And then now on the flip side of my work, I think that's changed a little bit. And that was like my own bias, that, a lot of Western science folks are really eager and excited to have that perspective brought to the table. And so we don't need to come in and be shy about it or self-conscious, just come in, and we have a lot to share. And so I think being really brave in that is important.
I'd really like to touch on what Gina's just said also. I completely agree. And honestly, I feel like it's imposter syndrome that we all face as Indigenous people. We underestimate the value of our knowledge, our experience, and what we have to hold and to share with the world. Indigenous people lived and thrived long before climate change. There's so much that we can learn from the traditional knowledge and practices that maybe science doesn't have in, same way. But it must be valued alongside Western science. And like you said, it's hard to choose a word, not necessarily respect, but there needs to be a mutual recognition between the two. And yeah, that would be my my view on it.
Louisa, thank you. And also Benson.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think the word that I'd use is almost a reckoning. It's a reckoning that science is actually catching up to cultural knowledge, and what that does is it does shift the power dynamic in regards to the valuing culture and cultural contributions that can be made to broader aspects of society, which then raises another important aspect of this, and it's around how do we actually protect intellectual and cultural property as well. And so, yeah, as an example, using the kakadu plum, which is wild harvested in some of our very remote communities up north, we knew long before science kind of proved the nutritional values of the kakadu plum. What we have seen in recent years, significant cosmetic companies trying to take properties, native foods and botanicals, because of their nutritional and cosmetic applications or health applications. And so it's really important for us as communities to, one, recognize the value and knowledge that we have across our communities, and step into spaces and to lead that element around the reckoning with these significant systems that actually do need to shift their interaction or intermingling with the knowledge of with cultural knowledges. And again, it comes back to communities being in the driver's seat of those and how we choose to participate in systems. So I think I agree with everything the speakers have mentioned, and that other layer is protecting intellectual and cultural property rights.
Absolutely, really important. Thank you, Benson. And Cheyenne.
Yeah, I just want to make another comment. So there was a case study that was undertaken actually on a farm, a station here on the East Coast, and there was sort of a development of this idea of wakatorua, which I think it was Maxwell et al. That did it and that undertook the case study. And essentially what they developed was, wakatorua, which is two waka that are connected and row together. So we have our traditional knowledge and our Western science. There's a real lovely respect between the two, and they don't have to work against each other. They're all rowing in the same direction. And I think that's a really beautiful kind of metaphor, for what I guess we're discussing.
Ngā mihi, thanks, Shane. And Ben, if you wanted to add in or whakaaro too.
Kia ora, everyone. I just want to acknowledge all of the speakers that have given their rich insights today. And really, I just wanted to support the comments that have been made, particularly around the inextricable connection between the people and the land and the environment, and that when we see the land as an ancestor that gives life, that breathes life, that sustains life, you know, that would lead to decisions that help us to do what's best for the environment. And that when we live in unity and in spirit with the environment, you know, that relationship can be a very two-way relationship with the environment and with the land and with our waterways. And that when we realize that the land is our ancestor, and that the waterways are the arterial veins of our ancestor, you know, that would deter us from you know, adding pollutants, and that would encourage us to make better decisions for the land. And if we think about why we would do this, you know, ultimately it's for our future generations, our children and our children's children that are coming through after us. So yeah, that's just a point that I wanted to make.
Kia ora, Ben, ngā mihi. And I think some of the kōrero that we had at our wānanga in May, I support all of the whakaaro and everything that's spoken about from our guest speakers. The interesting part that we had there is that this question came up around science and traditional knowledge, and you know, being able to work together. And it was interesting. So most of our, well, a strong majority came out and said our knowledge comes first. Our traditional Indigenous knowledge comes first. The sciences, resources and tools that we will utilise as deemed appropriate by our people in Indigenous communities. And it was quite an interesting kōrero which came out. And one of the examples I went to, we were blessed to be able to go to Patagonia and work with the Mapuche people. And they spoke about in a kind of a space where they had the scientists, they had lack of water. The scientists at the time said, well, you know, we recommend drilling boreholes into the earth to locate more water. And the elders of the Mapuche people said, no, we don't support that. We don't support doing huge boreholes within our communities because it's against our traditional knowledge, and also the hurt that they felt it would do with papatuanuku. And the scientists were okay. And that's that reciprocal relationship where our indigenous knowledge, our own traditional knowledge needs that respect and being able to play that into that same space. So that's just one example, but you know, thank you so much. I think it's a work in progress, and we can work together. It's just making sure that we lead it and our knowledge are first and foremost in front of that space. So I've got another question coming from the floor. Do you have any suggestions, advice for encouraging, supporting and inspiring our rangatahi, our youth, to want to observe, practice and live in our cultural practices? And also how we can engage with our young people more. I'll start off with Gina, if possible.
Do I have any suggestions or advice for encouraging, supporting, inspiring our youth? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have direct advice, but I just, from my personal experience from my life, it's what gives me pride. And so I can go to work and I can be an ecologist and do that as my job. But when I come home and kind of going back to that Maile and that relationship that I had with my dad and the plant, and now I have a garden and I grow it, or practicing Hawaiian medicine, that's really what gives me my sense of well-being, and also my sense of, I don't want to, pride in what I'm doing, and that this is an honorable pathway to continue to walk. So for all of our Indigenous youth, absolutely, like, just listen, come with an empty bowl, go to your elders and engage, and you're not gonna find it on a screen. You're not gonna find it, maybe you'll find it at your job, but I think for me, it's been the thing that's been really life-giving and given me hope as I walk forward. So I don't know if that was a great answer, but that's my answer.
Oh, no, fantastic. Absolutely. Thank you, Gina. And if we could move on to Ben.
Yeah, kia ora tātou. I definitely support the words of Gina. For me, it's about reconnecting to our lands, reconnecting to our communities, reconnecting to our tribal communities and lands, and speaking with the community and the leaders in those community, whether it's about learning genealogy, whether it's about learning the stories that have been handed down, and the special connection to the land. I think all of that holds value.
And now with Benson.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I really believe that leadership is relational, and so when we think about young people stepping into leadership, they need to be in an ecosystem, a relational ecosystem, who's standing behind them and who's standing in front of them as well. So I think it's multi-directional support that needs to be provided for young people. When I was leading the Leadership Academy years ago, there was 3 components that we really looked at around how do you not only kind of spark curiosity, but then how do you move that curiosity or that will into action. And for us, there's 3 components. There was underpinning it with values. These are individual and collective and cultural values. Then establishing the sense of history of movements and community, establishing that belief that we're the sum total of everything that's come before us, and that we are custodians to carry things forward. And then really underpinning the next step, or the outward step, with this notion of courage. And again, it's that relational, that multi-directional support that enables someone to step out into the unknown of courage. And courage, like the etymology of courage, is to be wholehearted. And so it's this willingness to go, but then this absolute sense of commitment to move. And I think those 3 aspects were something that, when we think about getting young people passionate about climate change or leading climate change, I think if we can underpin that their knowledge and belief systems with these 3 components, I think what we're going to see is a whole generation of people just really committed and passionate.
Oh, kia ora, Benson. Beautiful. And Shiloh.
Wow, very inspiring. Honestly, just short and sharp, but I think that I don't want imposter syndrome to get in the way of young people going for what they want. You can be more than what you thought you could be, and you are enough. You are valuable. Your perspective is more valuable than you could ever imagine it could be, on a global stage, in your community, and within yourself. As long as you believe in yourself, and you love yourself, love your community, then you'll be passionate about climate change, passionate about protecting your environment, your family, and yourself. And I guess that's it.
Oh, kia ora shainga mihi. Thank you all for your guys' responses. Yeah, just profoundly insightful, and I think really helpful in terms of moving forward for the IRN and for all of our Indigenous communities in this space. So it leads us up to the final question for our hosts or guest speakers. What final advice do you have for young Indigenous people interested in contributing to climate action? Cheyenne, I forgot you on that space, so if you can kind of combine your two questions, that'd be great.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. And I just want to acknowledge what everyone else said and support that. And I think building on what Ben said, for me, I guess the advice that I would give rangatahi who want to observe and practice and live cultural practices is go home. You know, I've only just come home in the last 12 months, so I grew up in the deep south, as far away in Aotearoa as you can get from my whānau. And so, yeah, I guess the crux for me is go home. You may not know your maunga, but your maunga knows you. Your awa knows you. And I think that's the key for me. And when you go home, you will see what is needed to protect the Māori, the life force of your whenua, of your awa, of your people, and that will drive, I think, the contributions that young people can make to climate action. Yeah, thank you.
Kia ora. And I just wanted to send out a paku mihi, a small shout out, I should say, to any of our whānau that are online from Tūrangi. And essentially, I just want to mihi out to our organisers for the wāhanga that we had in Tūrangi. And that's in the Central North Island, small Māori town where I was raised, predominantly Māori. And I had a bit of a kōrero about, I wasn't used to people mispronouncing words in my community because we were all Māori. And it wasn't until I went to university in Hamilton that I realised something, that my social norm wasn't quite everyone else's social norm. But I also saw the power of that. And, you know, our rangatahi, our young people that want to be together, that want to feel authentically themselves, and we need those spaces to feel like we can have our own lingo, we can have our own conversations and be authentically ourselves and not feel like what Shai spoke about, the imposter syndrome and trying to fit in that space, so to speak. And I just want to mihi to all of our people that helped with the wānanga in Tūrangi, because they brought our kura, so our school, and our rangatahi helped at the back. They did all the work on our marae, along with many people from my iwi, our hapu, Ngāti Tūrangi Tukua, and just acknowledging different iwi that came to that wānanga and also that are here today. And I think that part about our mihi and our gratefulness and that gratitude that we have for all of our Indigenous communities is really important. And really loving everyone from different iwi that have come on board from Aotearoa, moving into the international, our economies. Thank you so much for all of you being here. And I can see everyone's comments coming through right now. So I'm going to wrap it up with our final question. And so what final advice do you have for young peoples, Indigenous people interested in contributing to climate action? And I think we've already covered it. If anyone else has got anything they want to say to that, let me know.
Just any last comments before we wrap up?
You can go, Shai.
Oh no, yeah, go Tina.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, go local, like start at home, and if you're like, invest in your knowledge base and your relations and your kipuka kind of thing. But like when you understand and you're starting to see differences in phonologies, but in seasonal changes or your environment, then you can advocate for your place. And so I think young people are in the perfect position they're going to have the knowledge base that you have now, and then in 50 years, you're going to be able to talk to the changes in your place. And so just be really observant, because you have a lot to offer. Thanks, guys.
Ngā mihi, Gina, thank you. Absolutely, go local. And yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. And it's manageable. You know, it's something that we can come in and work together on. Anyone else with any final comments or thoughts or words that you want to add?
Perfect.
Right.
I think that's us. Well, I just before everyone jumps off, I'd really like to announce that this workshop is a series, and the next phase will be held in an in-person workshop in Peru next year, and dates will be sent out to all of you. But I'm really hoping to get your contributions to that, because we're definitely wanting to carry this on. This isn't the last you'll see of us. And also a note is that the Indigenous Research Network, as mentioned, we had our first annual meeting in May this year, and we are having our second annual meeting in May next year in 2024 in Samoa. So we will send out invites to that also. Thank you so much. And Kat, if you would like to wrap up.
Ngā mihi. I'm just going to do another plug, everybody. So from the floor. So essentially the Te Taiao Wānanga, I think it is, I'm just texting you now. So one of our audience members from MPI is Te Taiao Wānanga launches a kura reo. So that is basically a environmental wānanga, which is a kind of get together, and they launch kura reo, so our language kind of space. So they're pleased to announce an inaugural kura reo o Te Taiao that will take place in early 2024. So some of those guest speakers are Tame Malcolm from Te Arawa and Tahuia Taylor as some of our guest speakers from a Te Taiao background. Also blessed to have Professor Rangi Mātāmua from Ngai Tūhoi, Puke Timoti and Papaririata Makiha. Also from Te Mahurihuri Ngāti Pākau Te Aupauri and Te Arawa. Those are different tribes. With more to be announced from beginners, right from beginners in the language, right into people that are fluent, so beginners to matatou. So this kura reo for the environment will cater to all levels. So we'll get some information on our Twitter group of dates in early 2024. So if you're keen to attend, no mai haere mai. Sorry, the locations to be confirmed as well. So finally, thank you everyone. And if there's anything else we want to speak about, I'm just going to do a bit of a plug. We're looking at doing another webinar series in February. So watch your guys' social platforms and emails. So it's going to be another webinar series that looks at the IRN, TWA, how we can collaborate, look at different, a flagship project across member countries. So Shai touched on the GRA, and we've got 67 member countries, I think. Is it 67 now? I need to get my updates. It's always picking up. So and so we're looking at bringing that webinar series and how we can collaborate across our communities and, you know, essentially look at a flagship project moving forward together. So we're really, really keen to have you all on board and love to have you there in February. And I just want to, so before we end, because we've got a little bit of time, I just want to give a mihi to all of our audience members that have been adding into the web chat. And just essentially, just thank you all for your comments and the thanks to everyone coming on board. And I'm just going to read out some of these comments before we go. So we've got from Maureen McCarthy, wonderful presentations and inspiring thoughts for all of us. Thank you to Shiloh, Bo, Benson and all the organisers. Oh, Joe, not Bo. Joe, Benson and all the organisers, to the amazing speakers. We look forward to supporting the IRN moving forward. And also from Rosen Everson, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Thanks to you all. What a great kōrero and lots to think about. Lovely to see some whanaunga from Ngāti Porou Gizzy too. and also from Maureen. Yeah, we would love to share some of the programs that we are engaging youth with as climate warriors with the Confederated Salish and Kortenai tribes in Montana. Sorry, flicking between Māori pronunciation and English. Montana. So, and finally, I think we've got another, yeah, thank you for hosting from Benson, yep, and supporting such wonderful, meaningful dialogue. And from Roland, Crowbell, thank you for the webinar, for the talks, and looking forward to staying in touch. I'm going to struggle with this, but I'll learn. Niti Niyataki? Niti Niyataki? Thank you in the Blackfoot language, whose lands I am living on here in Canada, and Vielen Dank in my own language. So thank you, Roland, for your kōrero. Also for Nākia, ngā mihi koutou, thank you, everyone. Everyone jumping off. And yeah, thanks, Chao Mihia too. Chao Mihia. So shout out to everyone that's been here and attended He Mihi Nui. I'm going to hand over Shai. Joe, do you guys want to have any final words before we sign off and before I sign it over to Ben to do our kōrero whakamutunga?
No, just thank you so much for contributing and attending this session. It means a lot to me. I've put my heart and soul into the Indigenous Research Network and to these workshops. So thank you so much. And we'll pass it over to Ben to close with a closing karakia.
And final shout out to all of our people, Shiloh. Ngā mihi, Shiloh, like she said, she's done amazing mahi in the front, in the back, in the middle. So we're really blessed to have her along and so passionate. And also Joe. Joe's drive everything from behind. Ben, you know, all of our MPI GRA team and all of our guest speakers today. We just can't express, you know, how fortunate we are to have you all on board of our movement, we like to call it, and looking forward to seeing you guys in the future. Ngā mihi. Ben.
Tēnā koutou, o tira tēnā koe te tuahine Katerina. Kei aku rangatira kei ngā kai kōrero hurinoa, nei rā te mihi kaueke ki a tātou. I just want to acknowledge all of the speakers that have spoken today and have shared rich insights from your own backgrounds, from your own peoples. Just wanted to close our hui today with a traditional Māori blessing. Nō reira kia kara ki a tātou. Kia hora te mārino, kia whakapapa paunamu te moana. Hei huarahi paunamu mā tātou I tēnei rangi, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou tātou, haumie huie, tāi ki e. May peace be widespread, may the sea be like greenstone, a pathway for all of us today. Let us show respect for one another, binding us all together. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. Ngā mihi.